Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Today, I am absolutely honored to have our newly named Executive Director of Defending the Early Years, Denisha Jones. Denisha is a professor at Sarah Lawrence College in the Art of Teaching program. She's also a member of the National Black Lives Matter at School Steering Committee and a co editor of the Black Lives Matter at School and Uprising for Educational Justice book. Welcome, Denisha.
Thank you so much for having me, Keisha.
Yes, I couldn't wait for this. I'm so excited. There's so many. I was like thinking of your intro, and I was like, if I wrote down all the things that Denisha is involved in, I would need a book. You are a busy lady. And I am so excited to be able to work alongside you and see you bring this mission and your vision to life with DEY.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really exciting on this journey, starting with DEY and different roles, and now to be in this executive director position feels a little unreal, but I'm very excited to do this work.
Awesome. So I know that you've been working alongside DEY in many different roles along the way. Now, as the executive director, what is your first goal? Like, what is the biggest thing that you have on your heart to start working on initially?
There's so much that I want to do, and so much that I kind of outlined to the board and to the funders about my vision. But I really just want for Defending the Early Years to become an organization that supports what's happening in the field of early childhood education that are kind of aligned with our beliefs, right? There's so much good work that people are trying to do and they need help. And I feel like Defending the Early Years could be that help, whether it's drafting a policy statement or a research brief or talking to people and listening and helping them get their ideas out by connecting them with policymakers. There's just so much, but I really want us to be that organization that people say, hey, this is something we need to do in the early childhood field. Let's work with Defending the Early Years because they're the ones who get this work done. I think it's just so important to kind of be a lifeline for providers, parents, teachers, caregivers, and young children who really need someone in their corner who is, looking at the bigger picture and saying, we have a responsibility to really think about how we support and care for young children and their families. And there's just so much that we can do. So broadly, I just want Defending the Early Years to be that go-to organization. Specifically, that looks like a lot of the things we've already been doing, but doing more of them. So position statements and research papers that really outline what's happening in the field, what can be done, what needs to change. Engaging at local level in different events, whether it's conferences or going in and hosting like a listening session and hearing from providers about what's happening and what they need. And really what I want to focus on is really thinking about professional development, which is, something that all teachers need for various reasons, but don't receive well, right? We've all been on, PD that was planned poorly or didn't involve the right voices. So how can Defending the Early Years support professional learning in ways that really maximize the participants' knowledge and time and what they need? So really thinking about the idea of taking our research and into practice. What does it look like, right, to have all these research findings, but how is that really helping teachers in the classroom working with young children or in their homes or in their centers? And so that's just one of the big goals of mine, because I think it's just something that really need to do in the field. So there's a lot that I want to do. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Oh, it totally did. It sounds like Defending the Early Years will act as a conduit. And I love the term lifeline that you said. A
yeah.
lifeline, because especially right now, coming out of coronavirus, and we have these staffing shortages and just a reshuffling. I feel like, I hope, kind of in a very strong like way. I hope that this is a reshuffling of not only our in classroom philosophies and practice, but also the administrative portion of it, like the treatment of early educators, the pay of early educators, the environment that we're working in. I hope that this becomes a shift for all of that. And let me tell you, DEY and organizations like it are needed for that work. Like we need to organize. And I think that Denisha, you're a wonderful person to head, to spearhead this work. Something that you said that really excited me was the idea of taking research into practice. Like we have all these little bits of research floating around in different places, even some new recent wonderful research. And I feel like all of those strings need to be tied together in one strong knot to help us take that research to the people who are making the policies, who are deciding what happens in our classrooms, and amplifying it, making it common knowledge. Sharing it with parents. That's a big thing that I think um, not that many organizations focus on is parents. Like because with parents and teachers bonding together, I think so much power is there. So I really am looking forward to seeing that work and that those partnerships. How did you become a part of DEY? Like, what is the origin story of that partnership?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I first heard about defending the early years kind of on accident, sort of. I was living in Washington D.C. and one of the NACE, the National Association of Early Childhood conferences, was in D.C. And I, as a teacher, educator, and not a practitioner of young children, I don't always go to a lot of NACE events. But I remember going through the catalog to kind of see, is there anything that would stand out for me as someone who's early childhood advocate, but not working directly with young children. And I saw this listing and it was like defending the early years organizing meeting. And it was about organizing in early childhood and resisting all of the things that were happening at that time, like No Child Left Behind and Common Core and all of these things. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know that happened at NACE. So I went to the meeting. It was in one of the hotels in DC. And I didn't even know, right, Defending the Early Years was putting on this event. And I just kind of spoke up and shared that, I had been working with several organizations like Badass Teachers Association and United Opt Out, and they were doing these things. And we needed to make sure that the early childhood field knew about these tactics, about resisting standardized testing, saying no, and those sorts of strategies. And that was it. Like I spoke there, a few of them heard me, and they kind of reached out. And that's how I kind of first knew about defending the early years. And then we started to see each other in different spaces. There was a big rally in 2011 put on by Uniting to Save Our Schools, or Save Our Schools at the time. And Defending the Early Years, I think, hadn't started yet, but Nancy Carlson Page came to that event. She introduced her son, Matt Damon, to speak. And so that was a big introduction to her and her work. And I think Defending the Early Years started that later that year. I always say 2011 was the kickoff to a lot of grassroots educational organizing groups that started after that. Badass Teachers, Defending the Early Years, Network for Public Education, and United Opt Out. And so as they started to develop, it was 2014, I believe, at a Network for Public Education conference in Chicago, that Nancy and Jerry Lynn, who was working with DEY at the time of the co-director, invited me to be on the advisory board. And so that was the official invitation about 2 years, I think, after I first, or 1 year after I first heard about them and started speaking about and like trying to unite the work that we were doing in other spaces with early childhood, because as you know, early childhood often gets left off the table of these educational justice movements, mainly because most of the educators and the parents are not, they're with older children, elementary, high school. So they tend to forget about what's happening. And a lot of people think, oh, well, standardized testing doesn't begin till third grade. But as we know, there's a lot of pressure starting in kindergarten and even pre-K
Yeah.
to get kids ready for those tests. So how do we keep early childhood at the forefront of these kind of educational justice movements was always something that I was doing. And so working with DEY was one way to do that, serving on boards and always having that early childhood presence and always talking about and reminding them to think about the impact that this has on really young children and their families is something that we were able to do.
I don't know if the listeners know this, but it's so funny how the world works, like how things work, because that same DEY organizing meeting that you were at, Denisha, that's when I first saw you. And you stood up and said, my name is Denisha Jones and I'm from Badass Teachers Association. And that was the first time I had ever heard of bats. So
Mm-hmm.
that struck me and I was like, who's this lady and what's this Badass Teachers Association? I think I even Googled it sitting right there. So, you know, saw you there, heard you speak there, and it was, I think, I think it was 4 years after that. I don't even remember how long, but it was quite a bit of time after that before um, we connected again. I don't even remember how, but I'm very happy it happened because you've brought me on for the ride, and I have enjoyed it thus far. I really love the purity of the work that you're doing and that the board is doing and that DEY has done in the past. And I really look forward to seeing and being a part of what's coming, quickly coming forward. So tell me, in this work, what has been your new position's very new, but so we don't have to go from just your new position, but in general, this work that you've been doing, amplifying the voices of young children and early childhood educators, what has been the most rewarding? And then after that, what has been the toughest, like the hardest part of doing this work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the most rewarding is, like you said, how we met and didn't even know we met, right? How many people I've met in that space, right? And yeah, I mean, I met Susan Oxshorn, who's an amazing early childhood policy person and supportive of the work we do at that same event, right? And so just the opportunity, I think, to speak and meet people across the country who we have this shared interest and passion. You're right. I don't remember how we got involved after that talk at the NACI, but I know we did. And I think it was through, it had to be before that. It might have been online through Facebook, through Play. And I don't know how sure, but we met so many people who shared a like-minded vision about early child education. So it was this space. And I think that's been the great part is that there are so many people out there who are on board with what we're trying to do, and we just need to tap into who they are. And so I've had just immense privilege to just meet so many people across the country, traveling to China to learn more about play there, going to Pittsburgh and observing play in public schools there. I went to Tijuana to see what a play refugee space would look like for children there, and met incredible people along the way. So it's just been knowing that we're not alone, right? A lot of people say, oh, you're preaching to the choir. And I said, hey, the choir needs to hear from
Yeah.
its members sometimes. We need to hear each other because we feel
Mhm.
so isolated. When I was a kindergarten teacher and a preschool director, I never felt so isolated in the world of what I did. None of my friends and family understood what I
Yeah.
was talking about when I was complaining about, unrealistic expectations for 5-year-olds, or trying to support a parent when the public school system was telling them that my program was not good enough for their child, right? And so no one could understand that. And I felt so isolated a lot of the times. And it's been really great to go out and meet people who understand what I'm talking about and get it and know it and see it. And even though we might disagree on certain things, sometimes we still have this kind of shared
Yeah.
frame of reference. So that's been really amazing to know that there are so many inspiring early childhood advocates, educators, supporters across the world that are just they just all agree, and they need a space for us to come together, talk, share our ideas, and collaborate. And so
Mhm.
that's been really, really special. I think the most challenging part is also the fact that there are so many of us spread across, and especially in the United States, we don't, for good reasons, but it's also challenging. We don't have national early childhood policy, right? So trying to be an advocacy policy organization when we don't have a national policy is the challenge, right? There are so many issues, but they can only be taken up at the local or state level. So that, I think, presents a challenge, right? Like most people think, oh, you're based in Massachusetts. Actually, no, we're incorporated in Massachusetts, but we're a national organization, right? We're not just in one area trying to do our work, and we want to support people across the United States and internationally. But that means that you need to know what's happening in those local contexts, right? And so
Yeah.
I can't go in to a particular area and tell them what to do. And that's not my space, right? I need to hear from them what's happening. I need to understand what the challenges they're facing, what help do they need, and then figure out how to support them. So I think in many ways, that's the challenge, is that we are a fragmented field, right? There's no clear, like, we have a couple of organizations that are thought leaders, but there's no one, there's no one delivery system for early childhood education. It happens in private centers, it happens in nonprofit centers, it happens in public schools, it happens in homes, it happens in different spaces. So there's so much ground to cover. And it makes unifying our voices really challenging, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, well, someone will say, well, that's not my experience as a family daycare home provider. Or someone will say, well, my experience in a public school pre-K 3 is very different and I'm not allowed to do those things. So how do we support each other when we work in these very different contexts, I think is one of the biggest challenges. But I'm not saying we need to nationalize everything. I don't think having a national early childhood curriculum or policy is definitely what we need. But I think we need to recognize that bringing about change when you have so many different factors and contexts is really a struggle that we have to figure
Yeah.
out together.
Sometimes it's like we're speaking a different language. Even when we're saying, even when the the interpretation meaning the same thing, sometimes it seems like we're speaking a different language because, like you said, the context can be so vastly different. And I don't know if we, as an ECE community, leave room for that. Everyone's really focused on seeing from their perspective. So DEY would be a great place where I when you talk about it, I envision like DEY being a home base for all of these different multifaceted um places to provide early childhood, to come together, gain resources and support, and just have a collaborative voice when it comes to pushing and fighting for the things that we know are right for kids. One of the ways that DEY supports organizations, individuals, um, campaigns, events is through the mini grants. Can you tell us a little bit about the mini grants that DEY provides or that people can apply for?
Sure. So we've been providing mini grants for a few years now, and so it's been a really great way for people who want to do something related to our, that align with our mission and values about early child education and play, and they need a little bit of funding. So it's usually $500 is the max. Some people have applied for a little bit less, and it could be for like a one day event that you have ongoing, or you have coming up, or something ongoing where you have a larger budget, maybe of $2,000, and you just need, our 500 to support that. But it's been really wonderful to see, one, how people can stretch $500. Early childhood educators are excellent in that way, and to really support work both locally, nationally, and internationally. One of our, one of the people we funded multiple times and continue to work with is this group in Kenya. They come to us, they put on these events where they invite various early childhood institutions across the region to come for a day. So they'll have 20 to 30 early childhood teachers across the area to come in, and they talk about child development and play, and they stretch $500 in amazing ways. And we've been able to support them in doing that, and also support them in getting funding from other people, right? Because they'll ask us, well, you funded us before. Will you talk about your experience working with us so that we can apply for larger funds? So we're able to build that relationship. And I hope to go visit Kenya one day and see this amazing work that they're doing with the resources that we've provided. We've also done a lot of local work in different areas. Recently, one of our biggest wins was Peter Rothwich, who I met when I first spoke at an event at Sarah Lawrence before I took the job there. And he was a participant. He was a New York City teacher, and he retired, an early childhood teacher, I believe kindergarten or first grade. And he retired and moved to North Carolina. And he found out that while he was in North Carolina, that he wanted to get a law passed to prevent expulsion and suspension in the early grades, right? As we know, and me and Diane Levin wrote about this when I first joined the DEY board, that there's a harmful policy of expelling and suspending children in preschool. And so he wanted to fight that and get that law changed in North Carolina. And so he applied for a mini grant, and he worked with a woman out there, and they were successful. And it took a lot of different tries, but they finally got it happening to the point where the woman he worked with is now running for office out there. So we're really excited to see what people can do with the money locally. We've had some groups show up and they get funding every year for their event, right? Because they've done it before. We also encourage new funders. At this point, we give out the money 4 different times a year. So there is a deadline on our website at dey.org where you can see. And then we also ask you to send us a a description of the event, pictures, a write-up, so that we can include those as well too, and people can see what types of activities we funded before. So it's really exciting. I think it's great. I hope that in this role as executive director, I can help us fundraise so that we can expand and do maybe grants for $1,000, right? Or maybe double the amount of $500 grants that we give. But we're really excited to continue this work because it's part of the advocacy. And it's something that we weren't, a really large organization when we started doing that. We didn't have a ton of money, but we had enough to give out, several $500 grants a year. And I think that's what shows the power of how a smaller grassroots organization can support others, right? Like just give people money. It really helps them to do things they want to do.
Exactly. And you see it. It's like a seed that's planted and you see it growing. So to be able to take $500 and host events and work towards changing policy or creating a space for children to play or materials for children to play in weather that maybe they couldn't before is just really commendable. So I hope everyone goes, looks at the DEY.org website and looks for the windows of time when they can apply for mini grants. One other thing I want to touch on before you tell us how we can get in contact with you is the advocacy map, which I think is such an important tangible tool because I strongly think that we need to organize, we need to know who's out there, and we need to, as you said and as you do, connect with each other. So tell us about the advocacy map, who's on it, who can join on it, and how it came about.
Yeah, so the advocacy map was an idea, long idea in the making, where we wanted we wanted to have a way to kind of talk about what's happening across the landscape, right? That very contextual landscape that we talked about. And we looked at other groups, and some other groups would do a map, but they would kind of like rate states and districts on their policies, I think, right? And they might give them a failing grade or a passing grade. And we thought about that, but that wasn't really in line with who we were and what we wanted to do. We thought about what if people could go to a map, click on a state, and see the organizations, the legislation, the actions around early childhood education in that state. So that's what we decided to focus on with our advocacy map. And it got started when Emily Gasoy, who is a former teacher at Mission Hill School in Boston and is on the DC school board in Washington, DC, reached out to me. She's also an adjunct professor at Georgetown, and she teaches a class in educational foundations. And she has her students do a project, and they need to work with a nonprofit. And she said, is there anything Defending the Early Years would be willing to do with a group of students? And I said, yeah, we need to get this advocacy map started, and that requires work that students can do. So I worked with a group of, I think it was 4 students that first semester. And I gave them all a couple of states and told them what we were looking for. We were looking for organizations, early childhood organizations. We were looking for any type of legislation about early childhood. So whether it was about play, about curriculum, getting rid of testing in the early years, any of those things related to that state, and any other type of grassroots advocacy. And so they were the ones that first populated the first states, the first things that went on the map. They kind of put it together. We worked with our website content creators so we would know how it would look. And they were the first ones to get it going. And I'm so grateful for that group because it really was their work to get it going. And then my co-director at the time, Blakely Bundley, kept it going. She would constantly find things, scour the internet and the news sites and add things to the map. And now we get requests. You can go to the map and submit something. If we hear about something, we send it to each other. Like now, Jerry Lynn is our person who does that. So we can send her things or I can post it on there. But we're just looking at it to be a really good resource to connect with other people in your community who are doing this, to know what's happening and alerts. And so it's been really great to see it come together. But yeah, you can go to our DEY.org page, click on advocacy, and you'll see the drop-down menu for the advocacy map. And you can just click on a state. You can see what's up there. If there's something incorrect, you can always submit a correction. If you are doing amazing early childhood work and it's not on there, let us know. Now, we're not just listing, we understand a lot of people provide care like centers and that sort of thing. So we're not a repository for early childhood providers per se, but maybe your organization is having an event that's coming up that you want on there. Maybe you're working to get a local law passed about access to child-centered programs. We worked with Illinois, the organization called Families for Public Education in Illinois when they were fighting to get the right to play bill, and then their recent accomplishment was getting testing out of the early childhood grades, right? And so that legislation goes up on the map as well too. And we reach out to people when we know they're doing something and say, hey, we'd love to feature this on our map. So it's a really great tool to really just connect advocates across the country.
Yeah, and it also seems like it is a wonderful blueprint. So if you're someone who has advocacy on your heart and you just need to see like what can I do? What are other people doing? You can go to that map and really see what the people are doing in different states and take that as a blueprint. Contact the people who are doing the work, find out the steps that they took and make it happen because like you said, we're kind of like a patchwork of different policy from state to state. So thank you so much, Denisha. I am so excited for all that is to come for defending the early years. I'm so grateful for meeting you and the work that you are doing so passionately. Can you tell
Thank
everybody how they can get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Keisha. It's been great working with you and having you join us in DEY. And you're serving as our Director of Communications and Outreach, which I love because you're so
Oh,
good at talking to the people. And your podcast is amazing, and it's
thank
just been
you.
really great. So it's the easiest way to reach me is my email, which is denisha@dey.org. I also respond to some of the other emails we have, like info@dey.org. So you can either of those ways are the best ways to reach out to me. And yeah, please check out our website, check out the advocacy map, our publications. If you have an idea, something that you want to do, please feel free to send me an email. We have the newsletter that Keisha puts out every month, which is a great compilation of all the work that we've been doing as well too. And there's just lots of ways to stay involved, and we're looking for other ways to get involved. So if there's something that you're looking, that you have upcoming and you want us to know about in this new role, I love to travel. So I will try and be at as many events that I can, both local and national, and even international. Let's get some, I still think we need to plan a early childhood advocacy retreat in Puerto Rico or something like that, so we can all get together in nice spaces as well too and continue this work. But it really is a privilege and honor, and I'm really excited that everyone's entrusted me to take this work to the next level. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this with us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye bye.